Welcome back, Chappelle. All right, getting into your first flip of this two-day virtual week for y'all, right? Going ahead and throwing this out there that this one could be a little long. I don't even know. I haven't really started recording it yet. However, wanted to go ahead and also say that your grades are pretty updated as of right now, but you also have a pop quiz today, which will be put in the next couple of days. Just keep an eye on that stuff. This next upcoming test, which will be not this week, probably not the next week, but right after, is going to be a lot easier. All right, a lot easier just because this is one uniform concept. We're talking about like World War I, the Russian Revolution that happened during World War I, and then like the years after World War I, right? It's a very, very narrative-based kind of thing. Whereas in the last one, we were talking about what happens after Napoleon's gone and the rise of the isms. And then, oh yeah, when Napoleon was around, wherever you're in Latin America, and then we're coming back, and the revolution's like, it's a very difficult one. It was, like, to say straight up, it's the hardest unit of the year, and it's your first one you had in virtual school. So it's tough. It was a little bit difficult, but again, shout out to the girls that really, really crushed it. I was very impressed with a lot of y'all. Will say again, though, you'll need to up your game on your short answer stuff. That's why in that quiz today, there is one short answer question at the very, very end. Okay? Got it? You'll have to work on understanding these concepts, tying them all together. It's not memorization. It's understanding the narrative. Okay? But getting into where we left off, we just left off talking about the Anglo-German naval arms race that had to do with the dreadnoughts versus the Unterseeboots, right? Unterseeboot, all right? So these underwater boats, right? So leading up to this whole thing, though, this massive arms race is going to cause a lot of tension, okay? And it's also mirrored. Why do you need these naval boats? Well, to get to these places that you've taken over, right? It's mirrored in this imperialism idea. It's our third cause of World War I, our third simple cause. Now, we have a lot of other crazy causes. There's a lot of causes that were leading up to this for the common European. There were a lot of causes that were leading up to this for the industrial European. There are a lot of causes that are leading up to this for the powerful European. It's a lot of different things. Europe wanted this war by the time it actually broke out. Okay? They were looking for it. They were excited about it. I'll show you pictures later on of young French and German soldiers going off into the distance and getting ready to fight a war where they were literally going to be like drowning in mud and killing each other with their bare hands. It's going to be crazy. But this is another one of the simple causes. Imperialism. Because remember, imperialism was that big movement in the late 1800s when the Europeans were running around all over the world, particularly in the continents of Africa and Asia, trying to gobble up economic, resource-producing colonies so they could take all the goods from those colonies, shove them into their factories that they now had in the European continent post-industrial revolution, create more goods, sell them to their imperial colonized peoples, yada, 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 yada. But this is going to be a competition, too. That's why it was called the Scramble for Africa in the late 1800s, leading up to the Berlin Conference in 1884. So this economic competition, though, is going to be yet another thing that pushes a lot of these powers because they're going to start competing for a lot of this different stuff. One of them in particular that you'll notice by looking at this map really quick that's really, really heavily represented. Look at all the blue. That's your British. Blue owns a huge amount. Look at all the red. The French own 25% of the continent outright. Then look at one of the other ones in particular. Germany doesn't have a lot, okay? Now remember, Germany just became a country in 1871. And German leaders, like Kaiser Wilhelm II, kind of feels like he's like being picked on. You know, he's like, we're a country too. And then everybody's ignoring them because they haven't been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, like the French and the British and the Russians and the everybody else. So the Germans are going to get really particularly mad about this. They want more colonies. They want to control more stuff. And this led to a bunch of crazy mishaps. Like one of them was called the First Moroccan Crisis, when Kaiser Wilhelm II went to Morocco, which is up here in northern Africa, controlled by the French, and he tried to be like, well, y'all should liberate yourselves, and we'll help you do that, thinking that he was going to try and gobble up a huge chunk of French territory, because he felt he was being picked on, because Germany was just so young and like not small, and they were really wanting to flex their muscles because Germany might have been like young in age, but they were the strongest country in Europe when it came to their industrialism and their militarism. When it came to producing things, and when it came to making money, and when it came to having a big army, Germany was the biggest one out of nowhere. And now all of a sudden, in 1871, there's this now new big powerhouse that hasn't done their historical background check or something like that, which is absolutely ridiculous. But it's going to be one of these things that kind of helps lead to World War I. This imperialism, this I want more colonies than everybody else. I want more flags on this map than everybody else. So nationalism is going to be our final cause, okay? Nationalism and that tension between countries, that pridefulness about your people, your culture, your genius, is going to fuel countries to want to be the best and the strongest, okay? They're like Germany's saying, oh, we're young, but I want to be the strongest. And then the French are saying, well, we've been around for hundreds of years, and we are historically the strongest country on the continent of Europe. We want to stay that way. We are the French. Like all this other stuff. The Russians are the ones saying, Bolkaroshi, Zobrinya. They're really, really getting all like bent out of shape because they want to keep their autocrat government and their czars and their czarinas, and they want to keep ruling over all these different areas. So nationalism is going to be another massive one. Don't write the thing that I wrote below it, but it's just a good example of this nationalistic tension leading into World War I. So when the war broke out, an author, A.P.J. Taylor, wrote, "The people leapt willingly into war because there were cheering crowds in Berlin, Vienna, and Paris." They wanted this war. They were excited when it happened because they were going to get a chance to show the people back home and their fatherland is what the fatherland is what the Germans referred to it as, that they were the strongest generation, that they were going to protect their new country, and that they were going to be the strong people, the warriors of this militaristic age. Okay, so speaking of nationalism, though, one specific area that's falling subject to a lot of the nationalistic tensions are all these light-colored, tan-colored countries, okay? Those are most of your Slavic nations in Europe. So the tan-colored countries are your Slavic nations. Now, there are a lot of different Slavics, okay? There are your Eastern Slavics, that includes this in general area. There are your Southern Slavics, though, which are the ones that we're going to be particularly talking about. Southern Slavic countries include all the ones that we took the map quizzes on at the very beginning of the year. Remember when you were like this big and you took your first map quiz and you had to memorize places like Croatia, Slovenia, Serbia, Bosnia, Montenegro, Kosovo, which is not on this map, but that's a little ridiculous, Macedonia, Bulgaria, Albania, all those places? This area is going to fall subject to nationalism hard, all right? Like really, really severely. These people believe that they are minorities within these large empires, right? Places like Austria-Hungary and the Ottomans are the ones that used to control them. So this South Slavic territory was split between two really large empires, the Austro-Hungarians and the Ottomans. Through most of history, through almost the totality of European history, none of these countries were independent nations. They were all gobbled up by somebody else, because they were just small groups of people, typically a little bit more technologically behind the larger empires. So the larger empires would come in and take them over and use their area to produce resources and things like that and to extend their control. Now, this idea associated with nationalism is going to pop up. This concept, put stars next to this, highlight it. This is a type of nationalism. It was known as Pan-Slavism. Pan meaning all over or everywhere, to span something, pan-Slavism, the spreading, and Slavism being that nationalistic idea of Slavic people, that, oh, we're Slavic people, we have a different language, we have a different vocabulary, we have a different alphabet, we are different people, we should not be ruled by Austrians and Ottomans. Pan-Slavism is going to pop up, which is this belief that all Slavic people should unify and defend one another. This actually was achieved after World War I. Spoiler alert, when the Allies win World War I, there for quite some time, there was a country known as Yugoslavia, which meant literally like the Slavic country. But it got broken up later on into several other smaller countries. But anyway, this was incited by nationalism. This pan-Slavic idea was incited by nationalism in the late 1800s, okay? And in the late 1800s, a bunch of these South Slavic nations were oppressed or taken over by Austria-Hungary and the Ottoman Empire. Now, going into the 1900s, though, there was a lot of particular tension, okay? Certain ones began to break away. Serbia broke away in the late 1800s. Bulgaria broke away in the late 1800s as well. But that wasn't enough for some of these other countries. Because look at all these other areas that you have that are still controlled by the Austrians and the Ottomans. So the Austrians are in yellow and the Ottomans are in green, and the other South Slavic people that are free already are in pink. Now notice I got Greece down here. Greece isn't Slavic, they're technically Western European, but we're not going to get confused like that. But you do need to understand that they're a part of the Balkans too. And they believe also that the Ottoman Empire needs to buzz off and get out of here, and the Austrians need to mind their own business and stay over there. So after some of these early engagements, Austria gobbles up this place, Bosnia. So Austria still controls the country of Bosnia. But leading up to World War I, again, let's stop pretending like all of a sudden from 1815 to 1914 there were periods of peace. That's not necessarily true, because the Balkan Wars was evident of that. From 1912 to 1913, the Balkan Wars were fueled by this tension in South Slavic states, okay? Encouraged by nationalism. Because all of these Slavic countries right here, Serbia and Bulgaria, along with places like Greece, start attacking the Ottoman Empire on all sides, trying to liberate places like Albania, Macedonia, Montenegro, areas of Kosovo. Where else? Southern Bulgaria, there's one more that I'm not thinking of, but it's fine. We'll move on. Now, anyway, Croatia, other areas like that. Well, Croatia's up here, but still. They want to liberate these people, and these Balkan Wars were indicative of that. And the Ottoman Empire is losing Balkan nations and losing power. Something you got to understand is like the Ottoman Empire during this time period, they were like something in your fridge you know you need to hurry up and eat because it's going bad. It's just shriveling up as time goes on. They just don't have the same kind of power that they used to. They used to span the entirety of North Africa, of almost all of what you would consider the modern-day Middle East, and then Turkey, including up into the Balkan nations in the southern area of Europe as well. But they're dying, and they're dying because these places are trying to liberate themselves. And so the Balkan Wars are going to make tension even worse. And then after the first Balkan War, as you can see, the Ottomans got pushed almost all the way out, but they still control one very crucial area, this thing right here, the Strait of the Dardanelles, all right? So as you can see, they still have their Black Sea trade routes and their access to the Mediterranean, which is what they wanted to keep. But look at the Balkans now after their first Balkan War. Serbia, independent country. Romania, independent country. Don't call them Slavic. They get very upset if you call them that. Romanians speak a Latin-based language. They are not Slavic people. Don't call them Slavic. They might punch you. I used to wait tables with a girl named Serena who was from Romania. And she sounded like this, and she sounded like she went to murder me. But Serena was chill. She had like very, very sweet family, but just don't call her Romanian Slavic. Promise? Okay, pinky swear? Nice. So Bulgaria is going to liberate itself. Albania, some of these other areas are going to become completely autonomous countries, away from the Ottoman Empire. So the Ottoman Empire has been pushed all the way over here. But there's still one group that they feel like needs to let go. The Austro-Hungarians. Look at Austria up here in the top left. Look at all that orange they control. They control Hungary, Croatia, Bosnia. That's a big one. Bosnia. Bosnia is inhabited by ethnic Serbs, all right? So Serbia is where all of the Serbians live. Serbs, ethnic Serbian people. People from Serbia are Serbs. Now, inside of Bosnia, though, there are a lot of Serbs. There are a lot of them that live there. Some of them were born in this area and they lived up there their entire life, but they are ethnically Serbs, okay? So Serbia is getting really, really mad that Austria will not let go of Bosnia and let them become their own country. They don't like it. They feel like they're being suppressed, and they don't like how there are Serbians under Bosnian rule. And so this leads to this really scary moment in European history where everyone is like on the edge of their seats because they know something's going to happen, but they just don't know when. And they know at any minute, if something does happen, it's going to blow up, and it's going to turn into a huge war. There are several politicians that said that this would be the undoing of, like, European peace. Otto von Bismarck wrote and claimed that he believed that the South Slavic nations are going to be something that leads us into all-out war, because he saw it coming. Because remember, he unifies Germany in 1871. The Balkan Wars happened in 1912. It's easy to see in the span of only 40 years that something could happen. So he tried to tell Kaiser Wilhelm that. He tried to tell him, like, you need to get Austria to back off a little bit. And then Kaiser Wilhelm fires him, right? So the powder keg is what it became referred to as. This South Slavic area was referred to as this powder keg. And what a powder keg is one of the things we were just looking at. It's a barrel full of gunpowder, which is ready to explode at any minute. And when things explode, things get messy. And when we're talking about exploding right now, we mean explode into war. So the Balkan states were often referred to as the powder keg, because at any moment, everybody was like, okay, something's about to blow up, something's going to get crazy. And the match that lights this little fuse, you see that fuse right there of black powder? All it takes is one event. It's just like, and it sets forward a domino effect of other events that are going to lead to this war, okay? Now, here's the kicker, okay? We're going to talk about something now that I absolutely love. It's one of my favorite stories in history. It is the story about the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Remember when we first started this unit and we talked about like our outline of the Central Powers and the Allies? We talked about how Kaiser Wilhelm, with his dead, withered arm, is going to be the leader of Germany. And we talked about how Franz Joseph is the leader of Austria. He still is during this time period. He's 84 years old, though. He is very old. He is 2 years from death. Spoiler alert, he dies in 1916, in the middle of World War I. His nephew, though, is in line to take over. And his name is Franz Ferdinand. He is the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, his nephew. And some of you are like, well, did Franz Joseph not have a son that was supposed to take over? He did, but Crown Prince Rudolf was his name. He ended up killing himself in a hunting cabin. And that made Franz Joseph's father the next in line, which was the Franz Ferdinand's father, which was the brother of Franz Joseph's next in line to rule. Problem is, though, he dies from typhoid in, I think it's like 1896. So that made Franz Ferdinand the next in line to rule. And everyone's pretty aware that they think he's going to get a chance at ruling, because it's very, very obvious that Franz Joseph is old and he's just not going to make it. That man, Franz Joseph's assassination, is the match that starts this whole thing off. Now, granted, his assassination wasn't that big of a deal, okay? Like, I'm going to go ahead and throw that out there. His assassination was not, this is literally the answer to one of your quiz questions today, about how it's not that big of a deal. His assassination was not that big of a deal. The fact that he died was not that big of a deal. But the terrible series of events that followed were the thing that made World War I happen. Okay, you understand what I'm saying? So we'll get there. Just know that I'm saying it wasn't that big of a deal that he died. No one cared that much. There were other people that were shot weeks later in Europe with more people upset, more parades in the streets of mourning people, and more press coverage than this man's death. But this man's death is the thing that leads to World War I because of the terrible decisions that leaders made after it. Got it? There you go. That's what I'm trying to say. His death might not have been that important, but the decisions of how people wanted to handle his death was the thing that made everything go sideways. So anyway, let's talk about his death, though. All right? Take Me Out. It's just a general title. There is a song by a band called Franz Ferdinand that I used to listen to all the time in high school. It goes a little something like this. And it's actually based, that song that I just played a clip of is actually supposed to be loosely based around this guy's assassination, because get it? Franz Ferdinand's the name of the band. They wrote a song called Take Me Out. Like, pew pew, get it? All right, so anyway, the war started with the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Like, as in, the ball got rolling. Now, anyway, he is Austrian. Remember that, okay? Remember the area that they control. They control a place called Bosnia. Remember the country that is now liberated after these Balkan engagements. That place is called Serbia. Serbia wants Bosnia to be free from Austrian control because a lot of Serbs live in Bosnia. Got it? Okay, so Bosnia, Serbia, Austria. 3 completely different places, okay? Austria controls Bosnia. Serbia wants Bosnia to be free because there are Serbians that live in Bosnia. Very simple. Not that hard, okay? So many Serbs and Slavs, different Slavic people, live in Bosnia. And they see Austrians as oppressors, or people that are like trying to hold you down with force. So all of these little nationalistic groups are starting to pop up. This is not uncommon either. This is very, very mundane for 20th century Europe. This is common. There were groups all over the place. There were terroristic organizations, you could call them that, in Italy. There were anarchists from Italy that were really, really angry all the time and were assassinating people left and right. There were anti-czarists and like people that were assassinating people in Russia. Like the execution or the assassination of Alexander II is considered not a pivotal moment, but it's like a tier 2 moment in European history when that guy dies because he gets killed by another group, much like the ones we're about to talk about. The Italian anarchists stabbed the Queen of Austria, Franz Joseph, the 84-year-old guy's wife, when she was coming out of a theater with a sharpened file. She was a beautiful woman, too. It's absolutely sad. Now, many of these groups are not uncommon. We've got to talk about 2 of them in particular. One of them that popped up was this group called Young Bosnia, or the Young Bosnia. And it's made up of Serbs from Bosnia, okay? See them right here? It's not very many guys either. It's just a few of them. They're mostly very young. They're mostly university students. And they're not very experienced in this whole thing. They're a noob group. They're a very young group of guys. But this Young Bosnia group finds out in a news article that gets sent to them by, we still don't know who, but a news article gets sent to them and circled in red on that news article says the Archduke to visit Sarajevo. And Sarajevo is the capital of Bosnia. So the Young Bosnia group has just been warned that the Archduke is coming. And so they decide they want to assassinate him. They decide, this is the chance. We're going to do it just like everybody else does. And what is the main way to assassinate people during this time period? You blow them up, okay? But here's the problem. You don't have bombs, grenades, or guns for that matter because you're just regular poor people and university students in Europe. You don't have the cash to go buy that stuff or know where to get it. So they contact or get contacted by, nobody really knows which one happened first. They get the stuff they need from a larger Serbian group, and it's called the Black Hand, okay? So the Black Hand gave weapons to Young Bosnia to assassinate the Archduke Franz Ferdinand. This is why Serbia gets sucked into it. A lot of kids ask me from time to time, they're like, but if Bosnians killed the Archduke, then why did the Austrians blame Serbia? Well, a lot of it happens because the Serbians gave weapons to these people to actually get it done. So anyway, the Archduke had this visit to Bosnia planned for June 28th, 1914. Now that date is very important. Highlight that bad boy real quick. June 28th, 1914. That date is crucial for a couple of different reasons. One, it's the Archduke and his wife, Sophie's 14th wedding anniversary. They got married in the end of June in 1914, and they decide to maybe go get away and have a little anniversary. And now that's debatable. Some people are like, oh, well, why did he go there in the first place? Some people argue that he must have been doing it to be diplomatic, to try and show the Bosnians that Austrians are not all that bad, so he wanted to have a big parade and talk to the people and shake hands and stuff like that. And this is what they look like. Look how happy they are. Look at this little couple, right? That's Sophie right there, very, very sweet, and Franz Ferdinand. And funny enough, Franz Ferdinand might have been doing this because most people in Europe did not like him, all right? His uncle didn't like him at all. Kaiser Wilhelm II kind of liked him a little bit, was just like, you're conservative, I get it, you know what I mean? But nobody really liked this guy. The only person that truly loved Franz Ferdinand was his wife, Sophie, and he loved her unconditionally. They were obsessed with each other. They had a bunch of fat, happy little kids, and they were extremely excited to be getting away for their 14th wedding anniversary to go and visit somewhere new. And there are accounts of Sophie saying that when she met all these Bosnians, they were just so sweet to them, and they did not see a single mean person. But weirdly enough, too, that same day, Franz Ferdinand stood on a ridge above Sarajevo and was looking down at the city, and he was like, up here, it's beautiful, but down there, they're going to throw bombs at us. It's like he knew for a moment. He didn't know that these people were going to assassinate him. He didn't know of any assassination attempt planned for him. But remember, political assassinations were so common during the early 19th century that he was highly aware that someone might try. And you would think that you would plan better for that. Maybe bring in some army, some military officers, something like that. But no, he didn't do that. He just decided to show up a little early because he thought he might throw them off. So they show up earlier than expected to, and they have this parade. but they have the parade route posted in the newspaper. So the assassins know exactly where they're about to go, right? They know exactly where this lovely couple that they're so obsessed with each other. Oh, a lot of people didn't like his wife either. They did not like her at all because she wasn't of royal birth. She was only a countess, right? She was only a minor noble. She wasn't big enough to be the Queen of Austria. Jerks. Now, anyway, so Franz Ferdinand was supposed to be on this parade route. He was going to wave at people just like I showed you. He was going to shake people's hands. And that was actually the day before they were assassinated. The picture that I just showed you was the day before, because the day of, he was wearing a big, fabulous not horse-haired, actually. Was it horse-haired or was it? It was like green-haired top hat. He was just looking all great and stuff like that. Now the young Bosnians, these 6 men in the young Bosnia decide that we're going to wait until he crosses over a bridge. And when he crosses over this bridge, he won't be able to run side to side because there's water there, right? You're not going to be able to do that. And it'll keep him isolated. So we're going to wait till he crosses the bridge, and then we're going to slow the motorcade down, or when it slows down, we're going to like jump out in front of him and be like, ah! And then one of us is going to huck a grenade into the car. Because look, it's a convertible. It's completely open topped. So they're like, oh, well, we'll just toss a grenade in there. It's not a big deal. It would be a lot easier if you dunked it in there, but like you might get arrested that way. And the guy, turns out he was not R.I.P. Kobe. He was not that good, and he clunked it, and he completely missed, all right? It bounced off the hood of the car, and it ended up actually injuring some of the guards that came with him. So the only people that the Archduke brought to protect him were the only ones that got injured. Didn't even die, just got injured in this grenade explosion that bounced off the hood of the car and hit them, all right? So it actually injured a few nearby people, not necessarily the Duke like it was supposed to. Now, eventually, after this whole thing happens, you would imagine that the Archduke would be like, we should probably get out of here. Doesn't happen that way, though. Again, political assassinations were so common that he was not that fazed by it. Napoleon III, Napoleon's grandnephew that ended up becoming the second emperor of France, with assassination attempts multiple times. Louis Philippe, the guy that came before him, assassination attempt multiple times. One of the craziest ones was when this guy took like 25 gun barrels and tied them all together, and he tried to make like this, like, oh, I can't miss if I shoot 25 times. He goes, lets off all these shots. The thing actually exploded and ended up almost killing the assassin, and just a bullet grazed the forehead of the King of France at the time. Remember, these are super common, very common. So he decides to go visit the people that were hurt at the hospital. And after that's over, he decides to keep the parade going because there's no way they could try to assassinate him twice, and they didn't plan on it. The assassins actually had planned on leaving and just getting out of Dodge and being like, oh, okay, well, one of our guys got arrested because the guy that threw the grenade and he missed, he tried to run off, but the police saw him and they were like, all right, go arrest that guy. He tries to jump off that bridge into the water and drown himself and take a cyanide pill to kill himself. So he's like, oh, if I'm about to get captured, I'll take the cyanide pill. It'll kill me, and I'll jump in the river, and if it doesn't kill me, I'll drown in the river and whatever. It'll be fine. He just didn't want to be captured. And the cyanide pill, though, was expired, so it just made him throw up a lot instead of killing him. And it turns out it was the summertime, so the river was really low because it was the dry season, so it was only about like 4 inches deep. So he just like splashed around in this like puddle for like 10 minutes until they arrested him. So anyway, but after the Duke goes and visits the people that were hurt, right, and after they arrest the original conspirator, they decide to keep the parade going because there's no way they're going to assassinate me twice. And he would have been right had the craziest thing not happen. When they left, they had to take an alternate route just to be safe. And they ended up turning down the wrong street. The driver, who was Austrian, was being directed to go by Bosnians. He didn't understand what they were saying, and he turned down the wrong street. And when the Bosnians were like, whoa, 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 wrong street, big fella, the car came to a stop, and they didn't have a reverse gear on cars yet. So they were going to have to, like, 3-point turn it all the way around to get back out. When they came to a stop, they stopped right out in front of a cafe where one of the original 6 assassins was standing there, eating a sandwich and drinking a cup of coffee. And they were feet away from him. I'm talking just a few feet, like 10 feet away from him. And he looks at him, he's like, holy crap, they're right there. And he just pulls a revolver out of his jacket and clow, clow, fires several shots into the car and kills the Archduke and his wife, Sophie. Shoots her first, actually. When he shoots her, apparently the Archduke yelled out in a response of, Sophie, Sophie, don't die. You have to save, or you have to protect the children. And then after he heard that, pow, and he shoots and he kills the Archduke as well, which is super messed up. And the guy who killed them was named Gavrilo Princip, a 19-year-old Bosnian Serb, right? Gavrilo Princip. And this is him right here. He looks almost exactly like Shia LaBeouf. It creeps me out.
Do it!
Anyway, so, like, as you can see, this was a very crazy event, and they didn't know it was going to happen this way, and he almost avoided it. Like, I love to think about what would have happened had they not turned around the wrong street. You know, like, what would have happened had this not happened? Would there have been a World War I? If there wasn't a World War I, would there have ever been a World War II? Because if you didn't have World War I, then you wouldn't have an economic depression that hit Germany so hard that it gave people like the Nazis the ability to rise up. So it's crazy to think of if this accident didn't occur, would 10 million people have died? 40 million if you include civilians and also probably some undocumented people who died. And then, so this is what I was talking about. After the Archduke got shot on June 28th, 1914, everybody went on vacation. What? You see, a lot of other high school teachers pumped this event up to be way more than it actually is. So on June 28th, think about that in the calendar. June 28th, he is shot, okay? The war doesn't break out until a month later. If it was that big of an event, it would have broke out several days later. Now, some historians argue it's because it takes a while to mobilize your troops, but it's like, come on now, it doesn't take that long. The Industrial Revolution's got given you trains and ways to now navigate things faster. But everyone went on vacation. Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany told the Austrians, I'm going to be gone for 3 weeks, so y'all got to handle this on your own. They went on vacation, and this is George V, Kaiser Wilhelm's cousin, and them hanging out on a little excursion together. And this is the funeral of Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie after they got shot, which only lasted 15 minutes. The funerals of other people who were shot just a couple weeks after these two, their funerals had more people at them and lasted. Going back to that sense of ego, though, you know who did care a lot? The Austrian upper diplomacy. Not diplomacy, the diplomats, okay? The Austrian foreign minister, who is going to be in charge of dealing with this situation now, is really, really freaked out. And so he goes to Kaiser Wilhelm before he goes on vacation, and he's like, hey, we need to handle this. We can't just let some Serbians and Bosnians shoot our next heir to the throne and not do anything about it. Now, this could have been handled in like a really quick little thing, little war, just suppress it real fast, you know, do a treaty, maybe take parts of Serbia or something like that. Or maybe the Serbian government agrees to try and hunt the Black Hand down. Like, he could have done a lot of different stuff. But Kaiser Wilhelm, on his way on his vacation, was like, look, just whatever you do, I'll support you. No matter what you do, you have the unconditional support of the German Empire. That's referred to as the blank check. As in, Kaiser Wilhelm pledged that Germany would help Austria in whatever they decided to do. A blank check is kind of like saying, I will give you however much money you need. Just fill it out, all right? So that's a dangerous concept because now the Austrians feel emboldened that they can do whatever they want to do. So in July of 1914, early July, after the July the 4th was Franz Ferdinand's funeral. So right after that, in July of 1914, this thing called the July Crisis breaks out when Austria sends 10 demands to Serbia, knowing full well that they can't do them. And some of the demands were normal. Some of the demands were like, we're going to hold trials for the people that are, we believe, unjustly murdered our Archduke, da-da-da-da-da. But when these demands get issued, who starts to freak out a little bit? Not Germany, because Kaiser Wilhelm is on vacation right now. He can't be reached for 3 weeks. Russia starts getting real mad because Russia is Slavic. Serbia is Slavic. They feel like that's their little brother, right? And so when Austria issues these demands, Russia starts to partially mobilize their military, which means they're starting to prepare for war, all right? When Austria sees this happening, instead of hurrying up and taking care of everything, they actually slowed down. And there was this really, really big shuffling back and forth of telegrams, and the same telegram got sent twice, and all this other crazy stuff happened. And so the alliance system is going to start falling into effect, because when Russia mobilized its military, Germany began to mobilize its military, preparing for war, right? And everybody was so heightened up, and instead of taking care of it quickly and efficiently, it took them a month to take care of it. A month. So this is what I'm talking about. War would be declared on July 28th, 1914. July 28th, a month later. Austria declared war on Serbia on July 28th, after the July crisis. And once Austria declared war on Serbia, Russia declared war on Austria. And then Germany declared war on Russia because Austria is their ally. And then Germany just turns around and declares war on France because they know that Russia's allies with France, and they know that they're going to end up on a two-front war, so they got to hurry up and take care of it as fast as they can, right? And so every country starts just falling into these alliances, and this is what leads to World War I. See what I'm talking about? The death of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand and him being shot wasn't nearly as big of a deal as how poorly Austria handled this situation after the fact. Instead of just putting people on trial, maybe holding people accountable, and actually doing what they needed to get done, this whole thing blew up in their face. At one point, it was almost avoided, actually. The Russian ambassador to Serbia and the Austrian ambassador to Serbia, they both met each other in Belgrade, Serbia, and they were like, look, we can figure this out. We'll go ahead and come to an agreement. And they had an agreement, but they didn't sign it yet. And then the two guys were at supper together, and they were drinking wine and having a great time. And then the Russian ambassador just died of a heart attack out of nowhere. And everybody was like, oh, the Austrians poisoned him. And so it was a really, really big mess that led to this whole war. And as they began to choose sides, some countries remained neutral. One of the biggest and most important ones that remained neutral is not Switzerland, calm down, it's the Belgians, all right? The Belgians refused to get involved early on. And because the Belgians had signed a treaty with Great Britain and Germany earlier on in 1884, saying that they would remain neutral if a war ever broke out, and that they had to be respectful of that neutrality. And so Russia and the Allies began to mobilize in support for the war. The Central Powers did the same. World War I begins on July 28th, 1914. And by August 4th, all the major powers are engaged in war. So you're talking about July 28th, August 4th, within a week. It's just all-out war, all right? So we will talk about that later, okay, in our next flip, but I appreciate you guys being here. Remember, don't forget that quiz, which actually has a lot of this stuff inside of it. I'll tell you guys later on. Y'all have a good one.